Hi, welcome to another episode of the Caroline Glick Show and Chag Sameach. This is a holiday show. I'm taping it on the eve of Israel's Memorial Day, and it's going to run tomorrow night on the eve of Yom Ha'atzmaut. So from Yom HaZikaron, our Memorial Day for our fallen soldiers and victims of terrorism, to our the moment of our independence 75 years ago when the British mandate ended. And David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, declared the independence of the Jewish state, the first Jewish state to arise for 1911 years. And 75 is a remarkable achievement, and I want to talk about it a little bit with you guys in this opening, and then we're going to widen it in a big way with my guest today, who is former prisoner of Zion, former Israeli government minister, former head of the Jewish Agency, Natan Sharansky. I feel really lucky to have Natan with me this week to celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut with us here at the Caroline Glick Show, because Natan's life in many ways encompasses the miracle of the rebirth of the Jewish people in the land of Israel 75 years ago. So I feel very lucky that we were able to catch him and have this show with him. And I wanted to talk a little bit in my opening about some reflections that I've had over the past week or so, maybe lifetime or so, about the miracle of Israel and the nature of Zionism, the Jewish National Liberation Movement, and really Judaism itself. All of our history, and particularly all of the past 75 years, the Jews of Israel and the Jews of the diaspora have been veering between catastrophe and miracle. I read somewhere somebody, I wish I could quote him, and so I guess in a way I'm plagiarizing, but you could just say that I've been inspired by this concept that Israelis always feel that we've just been granted a miracle or we're on the edge of a catastrophe. And there's no middle ground. And it's true. I think that concept of fatalism, that concept of the existential nature of our existence, for lack of a less redundant term to come to mind right now, we're constantly feeling that we're at the edge of something, that our success is a miracle, and any setback that we get is a catastrophe. And there really is this sort of wild ride sense in a lot of ways to our lives as Jews here in Israel and maybe around the world. But right now we have extremes that are pulling us apart. And I talk about it every week here with you and with my guests on the Caroline Glick Show, about on the one hand, this week, right, the top story in all of the news broadcasts over the past week has been leftist activists, including bereaved families whose children have been killed in terrorist attacks or in the army in Israel's wars, saying that politicians, meaning government ministers, shouldn't come to the military cemeteries for the ceremony. On Yom HaZikaron, on Memorial Day in the morning. And if they come, they're going to be protested against. So they're going to take this sacred day, this sacred national day, where the entire people of Israel bow our heads and mourn the loss of our heroes, and they're going to turn it into a political football or a political demonstration. And really, they already have, just by threatening it. There was a commercial that's been running on social media for the past several days of graves. It's like a flyover, an aerial photograph of a military cemetery, and they're co-opting the 24,000 Israeli soldiers who have been killed since the beginning of the Arab war against Israel. Even in the pre-state days, I think 24,000. And they're saying that they died for the left to succeed in its attack against the Netanyahu government and its efforts to maintain unlimited powers of the court and the legal system here in Israel, or They died for democracy, which today has been conflating with overthrowing the democratically elected government of Israel. So this is the commercial that they show the graves of the military cemetery from the side, from above, and they co-opt all of Israel's war dead for their political causes, something we've never seen before. And the constant repetition of will there be demonstrations, should government ministers come to the military cemeteries, it's already politicized this sacred day, which is a day that is a day of unity, where we all, no matter what our political positions, no matter what our religious, our religious convictions, we all go to the cemeteries, we all mourn our fallen. And then, of course, Yom Ha'atzmaut the next day, where we celebrate our freedom and our independence in the Jewish state. That's already, they've already made it clear. Like yesterday, the mayor of Tel Aviv, Ron Huldaif, who last month said that, called for bloodshed, was given a choice by the Israel police. They said, look, you guys want to have this anti-government demonstration to close down Ayalon Highway on the eve of Independence Day, and on the other hand, you want 5 blocks to the west, you want to have a big celebration and a festival with singers and live bands and all the rest of it and fireworks. We can't secure both. We don't have enough policemen to take care of both of these things. So you have to choose one. And Ron Huldai chose the demonstration and blocking Ayalon Highway. I mean, right? And then, you have Mikhail Milk. I don't know. I'd never heard of her, but whatever. She's she's a luminary on the left. She writes for Haaretz. And most important thing to know about Mikhail Milk is that she's Shimon Peres's granddaughter. So, this is like a child of privilege on steroids from an Israeli perspective. And here she is. She gave this impassioned video this week, I think like 7 minutes of pure hatred against the government and its voters, where it was just one defamation after the other against the judicial reform, saying that, this is going to put women in chains, and the ground is burning beneath our feet, and Israel has never been in greater danger. And she's all in English, and she's talking to diaspora Jewry. You must stand with us against the government. Yes, it's traditional that AIPAC and all of the American Jewish organizations have stood by the democratically elected government of Israel. But here, we want you to make an exception and decry Israel's democratically elected government and stand with the people who are blocking traffic and upsetting military cemeteries and memorial events for our fallen soldiers, because we're in the right and anybody who opposes us is in the wrong. So that's, on the one hand. And then yesterday, well, much smaller, but still importantly, there was this Twitter post that got a lot of attention and a lot of support, which is, I think a woman wrote this post where she said that all of Israeli history books have to be rewritten, and all of the founding fathers and mothers of the state of Israel have to be exposed as the racists that they were, and all of their grandchildren, great-grandchildren have to be re-educated to understand that everybody who formed this country was a racist, and they all persecuted Sephardic Jews, Mizrahi Jews, who came in from North Africa and from the Gulf area, from the lands of Arabia, because they're all evil. And of course, we've seen and we've experienced, and still today we see gutter racism on the part of a lot of the leftist elites in Israel. It's really just been pouring out because they support, Sephardic Jews, by and large, support right-wing parties. So we've seen there's a spritzing of racism. It's true, but I mean, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? It's exactly the same as what's happening in the United States with the radical left, saying that America was born in systemic racism and America's evil, and the American founding fathers were terrible people. They were slave owners, and Thomas Jefferson and George Washington have to be decried, not celebrated, because they were evil white men, and now they're dead white men, and we hate dead white men just like we hate live white men or whatever. I mean, the hatred, like you have no appreciation for what David Ben-Gurion did, what Golda Meir did, what Levi Eshkol did, what Moshe Shertak did, what all of them did. You don't get it? Like, nothing? None of this speaks to you? You're just angry? Don't you understand? It's not just throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Why would you want to burn down the house because you're mad? And that's what we're seeing on both sides. We're seeing people on both sides saying, we want to burn down the house. The ground is burning beneath our feet, says Mikhail Milk, Shimon Peres's granddaughter. Why? No. We're having a political argument about the nature of the regime here. What is separation of powers? Is it good? Is it bad? These are basic questions, all true, but the ground isn't burning, except that you're burning it, right? They put part of their protest was they put like thousands of Yortzeit candles on Ayalon Highway, which has just become like their mall, I guess. It's a major traffic artery, but who cares, right? People have to sit at home now so that they can have their theater. So thousands of Yortzeit candles, they lay on the highway. Where are the police? Why do they have to be there? Clearly they're not doing anything, but whatever. So, they are burning the ground, right? They're lighting these candles. So, okay. But we have to recognize that this is, these have to be marginal voices. They can't be the voices of the middle, of the massive middle, like 95% of Israelis between two poles, because it isn't. The vast majority of Israelis, and I say this as somebody who is a committed, right-winger, Jewish nationalist, whatever you want, like that's me, right? But so what? What connects me to Zionists on the left is far greater than what divides me from them. And we all, the vast majority of us know it. And I asked Natan Sharansky to come today, not because he's a symbol, but because he doesn't agree with me on judicial reform. And he's written and he's spoken out, against what the government is trying to do. And I thought, yeah, we disagree on that, but the concept that that's what defines my relationship with Natan Sharansky, or how I look at Natan Sharansky, who is a Zionist hero, who's a Jewish hero for the ages, is insane. And so, yeah, I wanted to talk to him. I wanted him to be the one to talk to us about this week, about Zionism, about Jewish peoplehood, about Jewish statehood, because he has something that we all have to know. And just as I'm not defined by one thing, neither is he. And this country is so many different things. And, am I pessimistic or optimistic about the future? We've had two Jewish states in the past, and they both died really at 75. And so a lot of people were looking at the 75th Independence Day with dread before any of this happened, just looking back at our history. And I think that we can guarantee that 75 will turn into 100, will turn into eternity, if we realize that, of course, there are different opinions. One of the midrashim, one of the Jewish folklore tales that maybe my favorite one. It was just by one rabbi wrote it, and he said that at the parting of the Red Sea, this is like a seminal moment in the forging of the Jewish nation, of maximum unity. Right? We're all with our backs to the Egyptian army, and in front of us is this raging sea, right? And then, boom, the sea divides and the dry land appears, and we walk across it to freedom, right? That's like, I guess a more seminal moment came later at Mount Sinai with the Ten Commandments, but still, this is huge. This is a huge thing. So the rabbi in the Midrash said that even at that moment, when the people of Israel and the children of Israel crossed the Red Sea, they crossed by tribe. They crossed in 12 lanes. It was like a 12-lane highway. And, Judah and Reuben and Levi, all of them were in their separate lanes because we are one people, but we celebrate our diversity. We have a lot of different views on things. And sometimes one lane is faster and sometimes one lane is slower. But at the end of the day, we're all going to the same place. And I think, that our strength is found in those 12 lanes. and we're always going to be different, and we're always going to have different views. But we have one Jewish state, and one homeland, and it's here in Israel. And I really do believe that the people taking aerial photographs and posting these really wretched ads on Facebook and on Twitter, posthumously converting all 24,000 fallen IDF soldiers to the cause, or people who, on the other hand, are angry and saying we're going to rewrite history and we're going to blot out the contribution, which we're going to demonize, of the socialist Zionists who led the country at the outset. We're gonna take that all away. I think that they are voices on the margins. They have to be marginalized if they're not, because we don't have any choice, and there really isn't any reason for us to go in that direction. So, I'm so thrilled, to be here in Israel and celebrating Yom Ha'atzmaut with my family, with my community, and with my people here in Israel. It was making Aliyah was a huge move when I was 21, and it was the right move, and I'm grateful that I did it. Grateful to myself and to God for pushing me in this direction. And I think that a great future awaits us all together. And we just have to remember that the great unity of purpose and of destiny is really bigger than every disagreement that we share as we walk in our separate lanes together to our common future. So those are my thoughts, and now I feel really lucky, and I hope you agree, to be welcoming Natan Sharansky to join me today for today's broadcast. All right. Well, like I said, this is Yom Ha'atzmaut today, so Chag Sameach to Natan Sharansky, my guest. I'm so thrilled to have you here to mark the day, celebrate the day with me.
Chag Sameach to all of Israel. It's a great
Amen.
day.
Amen. So, I want to tell you guys, right? When I called you up last week to ask if you'd be in the show, we weren't quite sure how this would work, or you weren't sure, because Natan said to me, "Look, Caroline, I see you on TV, and I don't agree with a lot of what you say." And what did I say to you?
Yeah. But there is probably even more that we agree. That I also agree.
Right, exactly. So, I think the story that we want to tell today, and really we need to remember every day, is that there's a growing chasm between us, and I think part of it is because it's becoming more difficult for us to remember who we are and why we're all here together. So I thought, going back to you, the audience, there's nobody to really remind us of what it is that we're here for than you, Natan Sharansky. So again, thank you. And Natan, I wanted to start this conversation a little bit out of left field, maybe even radical left field, which is that on Motzei Shabbat, on Saturday night, the state television televised, rebroadcast their monumental miniseries about the birth of Israel, A Pillar of Smoke, Amud Anan. I think it's a miniseries, but there was only one chapter that we watched. And so I'm sitting there watching with my husband and our kids, and they had this part that every time that I think about this story, I can't help but see God's hand coming down and intervening, because what happened was they were interviewing Abba Eban, Israel's statesman, and who was at the UN General Assembly at the time. And, it was the Soviets, not the Americans, who supported the establishment of Israel, the partition, recognizing Israel. They through the Czechs, they armed the nascent Israeli army and enabled really us to survive the Arab onslaught. And we don't really tell this story a lot because it's so weird, right? Stalin comes in, he supports the Zionists, he supports the Jews, he gives us arms, and then boom, like 5 minutes later, when Golda Meir comes to Moscow in 1949, he starts planning a Holocaust of Soviet Jewry. So how what did Soviet Jews think when they saw this, and what was the story that they told themselves about this?
Look, of course, Abba Ibn was a great diplomat. And if you were saying it as a diplomat who even sometimes in these days, some of our diplomats feel that they have to say good things about Putin. So I'm angry about it, but I understand that sometimes there are some interests. But if he really believed in it, that thank you to Soviet Union and to Stalin and to Kholmokovsky said, Gromyko, that we are created, then I would say it's extremely shtetl mentality.
Okay.
That we are thankful to our boss, or we are thankful to his almighty.
But why did he support it?
So let's see what really was. First of all, it's 1948.
Right.
I was born in 1948. My mother told me that in those days when I was born, she was extremely concerned. She was extremely concerned with the future of her children because that was the beginning of awful anti-Semitic campaign of Stalin. Mikhail was killed, and it was like the first shot in this anti-Semitic campaign, some days after I was born. And my mother was, very concerned. She was very happy that the child was born, but very concerned about the future. And then she said, and when the state of Israel was created, a few months after this, with all this fear, she really felt that is something very hopeful happened. And they knew very little about Israel. Now, why Stalin, at the same time when he started his anti-Semitic campaign, why he was supporting Israel? Because he looked at Israel is like his pawn, his Sustrayani,
his Trojan horse.
Yes, in the Middle East against Britain. That Britain is controlling imperialist countries, his enemies, that he is in Cold War with them. He really thought that after the war he'll simply keep fighting with them, and if not nuclear weapons of America, maybe he would really move further to conquer all the Europe. And here is, in the Middle East, Britain is the only player, and suddenly there is a new state where communists, maybe not exactly his communists, but and definitely socialists, are the leading force. And he learned how through Comintern play and use all these left parties all over the world. So he looked at Jews in Soviet Union. He saw as his enemies that finally he's going to finish this Jewish question. Jews in Israel and Israel itself, he saw like a pawn for his great game against his enemies. And very quickly he found out that these Israelis, these communists, socialists, kibbutz, mashav, trade union, all what he was building on, it's not going to be the pawn. It's a real independent state which will not think twice to fight also against his interests if his interests will be against Israel. That's why very quickly his anti-Semitic campaign in the Soviet Union and his hostility or disappointment in Israel were united in one big anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli campaign.
So in 1948, so first of all, just summarize what you said, because it's interesting, right? I mean, Israel was literally, without anybody on its side. Yeah. And, Dean Rusk, according to Howard Sacker, he told the Jewish Americans, he said, look, if you try to force the issue of the establishment of Israel, if David Ben-Gurion declares independence, then we're not going to allow Jews to give charitable contributions to the Zionist cause. And so Dean Rusk denied that later, but
Marshall, the secretary,
he was opposed to
he was absolutely against.
They wanted to replace the mandate with an international trusteeship. Yeah. They didn't want a Jewish state. So, so here is Israel, and then this evil monster, Stalin, comes out of left field and says, okay, here are some arms from Czechoslovakia, which I've seized control of this country. I've swallowed Czechoslovakia, and now we're going to give you arms. And that was really what saved the day. And so, and he did it because he was anti-Britain. And And the Zionists were fighting an anti-colonialist uprising, guerrilla war, whatever, against the British Empire to get them out of here to get Jewish statehood. So we had a very temporary confluence of interests with this mass murderer who was a genocidal anti-Semite, which is,
Yeah, well,
I think it's a miracle. I don't know.
Well, as a chess player, I can say that Stalin saw all the world as a chessboard, and he knew how he can win. And he had no problems one day to have agreement with Poland, the other day to conquer Poland. He had absolutely no problem to say any government that we have to strengthen our relations, and at the same time to use Comintern to undermine it.
And subvert.
He was a chess player. What he didn't expect
The
that
Jews.
Israel in those days, they were even better chess players, and they knew how to use Stalin without becoming really dependent on him. Well, we can say that there was a lot of Ben-Gurion's rule of the country, the socialist, non-democratic way, but it was not because of Stalin. It's because
Right.
of our own political interests of Ben-Gurion. So we never became the pawns of Stalin, and that was very important. And very quickly, Stalin understood it, and if he could, he would destroy Israel, which he supported any moment. When Stalin died in 1953, and I was 5 years old, my father told me, "It's a great day for us Jews. Miracle happened. You have to remember all your life that when we were at the moment of destruction, miracle happened, Stalin died, but don't say it to anybody, do what everybody does." And I go back to kindergarten. I cry together with all the children about Stalin, and I have no idea how many of them are really crying and how many of them are pretending, like me. So Stalin was in our childhood. There was nothing Jewish in our childhood except from anti-Semitism. But Stalin was a villain, enemy of Jewish people, of no Jews, because there was no Jewish people. We were Jews because it's written in the ID, and that's why we are victims of anti-Semitism. So it's ridiculous that until this day, some people in Israel really believe that Stalin is kind of Mashiach of Jewish people.
That he's the Messiah. Yeah. So, let's just go for a second to what you just said about, we weren't Jewish in any way except that we were victims of anti-Semitism. What does that mean? Like you didn't, I mean, so what, is that really what defined your Judaism?
No,
just
victimhood? It didn't define Judaism because there was no Judaism. We were absolutely assimilated Soviet Jews. That was the policy of Soviet Union. So I was born and grew in Donetsk, which today is the center of the war. But then there was no war. There is written in the identity card of your parents' nationality. There were like more than 100 different nationalities, but only one method, Jew. Because if there is written Jew, all the conversations at home are about restrictions, about what kind of career you cannot make, what kind of university you can be enter and not. And at the same time, you didn't have any place that you can learn Jewish language. Of course, you didn't have synagogue. You didn't have Purim or Pesach. You didn't know these words. You didn't have Brit Milah or Bar Mitzvah. There was nothing Jewish. So to be Jew is like to be born with disease that you'll have to live with it all your life. And you have to learn what will be the medicine. And the medicine is, as parents explain, is that you must be the best in physics or mathematics or in chess or in music, because that is the way of our survival. That is the way to succeed in spite of anti-Semitism. And this double-think life, without identity and without freedom, came to the end in 1967, when Zionism really entered our life. Before Judaism, before culture, before anything, it was Zionism which entered our life.
Before we get into 1967, there was that moment that I threw out for a second when I was talking about what Abba Eban did and what Stalin did. which was when Golda Meirson, Meyer, came to Moscow and came to the Moscow synagogue in 1949 as Israel's first ambassador to the Soviet Union. And the images of the descriptions of what happened there with her meeting with Soviet Jews is something that, are unforgettable. I mean, there was, Judaism wasn't dead. Jewish identity wasn't dead in 1949.
Well, first of all, let's say, in my place it was dead. In Moscow, there were very small groups, who would dare to come to Moscow synagogue. But here comes big event. Jews recognize that they are not loved, they are discriminated, they should not show any sign of belonging to Jewish life. But suddenly, there is something where you can demonstrate your love. The State of Israel at this moment is an ally. It's still, I think it's already Stalin at that moment started understanding that he will fight Israel, that Israel will be enemy, that he will have to build Arab allies against Israel. But still officially, Soviet Union was supporting Israel, and there was a feeling that suddenly something Jewish you can express openly.
It was permitted.
It is permitted. And of course they rushed. Here is representative of Jewish people, Robert is coming, and she is officially greeted, because when there are some Jews coming as tourists, you can meet them only secretly, you can get some book. Here openly, Stalin or Gromyko or whoever is greeting ambassador of the State of Israel, and you can, without fear, you can express your feelings. Of course, it finished very quickly.
Right.
And then later, many people who could be recognized on the pictures were
Arrested.
haunted, persecuted. No, I want to remind, it was in 49 to 52, all the Jewish institutions were closed, all the Jewish writers were killed, and not because they were good writers. Some of them were very bad. Some of them were hailing Stalin. But if you are writing in Yiddish, you are killed. And of course, all the first one who was killed, Mikhail, and all the Jewish theater was or arrested or killed. So next few years, and preparation of this big trial of the doctors who poisoned Soviet leaders, which had really to influence on the life of millions of Jews who had to be expelled from the cities. All this happened almost immediately after this. I think this meeting between Golda Meir and the Soviet Jews, enthusiasm of Soviet Jews, that was one more proof to Stalin that he has to act against Soviet Jews as quickly as possible, because they are not a loyal part of his chess game.
So, 1967.
Yeah.
What happened?
What happens? As I said, our Jewishness is in our career. And I am accepted to the best institute in physics. It took me years and years to train myself as a Jew. I had to show much better results than anybody else. I was one of the last Jews who were there. So that's it. That is, as I understand, freedom, what I got, because finally I am above the pale. I crossed the pale. Where pure science, and that's it. But of course, you have to adjust yourself to Soviet system. You have to continue saying slogans in which you don't believe. And then comes Six-Day War. And of course, the fact that Jewish state have won in the battle against a regime which we don't like was very pleasant. But to say that it was like your football team of your city won, so it's good. To say that it was more important than our exams or our dates, no, because that's something nice to know. Here is your life. And then it changes in a few days. It changes because you see that all these people around you, those who love you, those who hate you, everybody, they're saying you, how you Jews did it. They don't say that maybe because you're a Jew, maybe you have some acquaintance who can explain us this mystical victory, because really the most powerful dictatorship in the world, sent so much money and weapons and so-called advisors, and started celebrating the victory of the progressive Arab countries over the Zionist imperialist agent. And suddenly, in one day, it all changes. So they're asking how you Jews did it.
You mean they admired you?
No, well, some admired, some hate, it depends, but they all connect you to Israel. In the beginning, I'm almost afraid. They think that I'm not a loyal Soviet citizen. But then you understand that you can be very proud of it, that whether you want or not, you're connected. So you really want to understand this mystical connection. That's when we, at least I, started reading in the underground, the books which you could get through tourists who were coming. Usually, they couldn't come from Israel because there was no diplomatic relations, but they were Jews who had double citizenship, or Jews who were asked by Jewish organizations to come and to meet with some Jews. And so we started getting the books to read about ourselves. Suddenly you understand that if you make some switch in your mind, your history will not start from Great October Communist Revolution from 1917. It will start from Exodus from Egypt. And it's so exciting. It's so interesting. And then you look back on these pictures of 3 soldiers near the Kotel, and you understand they're 20 years old, and you're 20 years old. And they're participating in real history, in such a great, unique history. And you're participating in the struggle to pass good exams in physics and mathematics. So you discover the history. You discover the people. All these Jews who are coming from America, they're saying, oh, my father is also from Odessa, like your father. We are family, we want to help. And you discover the state which is ready to send airplanes to the end of the world in order to liberate you. You know, many years after, when I was activist and fighter, and they came to arrest me, the picture of Yoni Netanyahu was on my wall. And not because of Bibi. Bibi didn't exist yet in our lives. He existed very much later when I was in prison, but not then. Because that was such a powerful image, even when you're in prison in Siberia, and suddenly you hear this engine of the airplane, you think about Entebbe. And you understand that they will come and Israel airplane will take you in Israel. So suddenly you discover your identity, and that gives you strength to start fighting for your freedom. That's how this, first it was Zionism, then it was history, then it was culture, then it was religion. That was our way.
You know, it's so interesting, and really it's depressing to me hearing you, because, I mean, it's uplifting, but then I think, on the other hand, about the situation, how it's just been reversed today, that the demonization of Israel through the new anti-Semitism that we're seeing, you know, in all quarters in the Western world today, is taking away, is stealing, really, the birthright of Jews across the Western world, that instead of, and even inside of Israel in some quarters, but you're seeing that the truth of Jewish history, the extraordinary nature of the rebirth, the national rebirth of Israel, is that so many Jews in America and in Europe, they feel embarrassed by it, that they think that there's something that they don't. What do you say to them?
Well, there are a few things. First of all, Israel is by far the most successful national movement until these days. By far. But it's not only national movement, national liberation movement, but it's not only national liberation. We are probably the only people in the world where there is no separation between Judaism and nationality. So, and we have this polarization between people who believe that it's the hand of God which created us, and those who believe, no, it is the Ben-Gurion's Palmach who created Israel. But in fact, one cannot be separated from the other.
No, I agree.
And that's, maybe from this point, we are the only nation. Then we are also a nation which always faced anti-Semitism, and I'm dealing with modern anti-Semitism.
You're the
of
one who
35
gave
years.
the world the three Ds:
Yes, really,
demonization,
Be-
delegitimization, and double
Yeah,
standard.
no, because for people it is difficult to accept. Even for Jews it is difficult, not speaking about Goyim, that hatred of Jews and hatred of Jewish state is of the same nature. And as a result, even for me it was surprised because anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union was so clearly connected to dictatorship. But the fact that in the free world, 20 years later, I'll find out that hatred towards Jews moves to the hatred of Israel and vice versa. But for Jews, it is very important, for young Jews, to feel that they're involved in Tikkun Olam. I traveled over more than 100 universities, and I know very well, if some young person is not dreaming about Tikkun Olam, probably he's not Jewish. That is a very Jewish thing. But I have to explain them again and again that Tikkun Olam needs a lot of strength, a lot of energy, a lot of devotion. And you will not find any source for this strength except from your identity. So this feeling that because I want to be the person of the world, and that is my Jewishness, to be the person, I cannot be the person of the tribe, or I should be embarrassed that I'm pushed to be back also a narrow person of the tribe. It's absolute nonsense. I was spokesman and activist of two movements, Zionist movement and human rights.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask
and
you
that
about.
was, one was, if I had the strength to fight for human rights, only because I discovered my Jewishness, and that what gives you values bigger than your survival. Without it, you're simply thinking about your career. And that's something that young Jews have to be reminded again and again and again. And I can't say that we Israelis are good in reminding this. And some of us are not believing even in this connection.
You know, it's so interesting because, I mean, you know, our common friend, Ruth Weiss, who's also been a teacher to me. I mean, I've learned an enormous amount just from reading her books and talking to her. But, you know, she talks about how diaspora Jewry, and she talks specifically about Canadian and American Jewry, that they don't, she wrote that book, If I Am Not For Myself, right? And that you can't be a friend to mankind if you don't know who you are, and if you don't value your own specific identity. And you've done a lot of work on identity as the head of the Jewish Agency. Most recently, that was one of the flagship concepts that you were pushing. Can you tell me a little bit about what that project was and how you felt it worked or didn't work?
Well, there were many projects which I pushed in Jewish Agency,
vision.
but overwhelming ideology that I really tried to reshape or to change a little bit direction of our Zionist flagship was that everybody thinks that Jewish Agency is about Aliyah. And in fact, the State of Israel is created for Kibbutz Galuyot, which is true. That's what I also feel.
Gathering of exiles.
But gathering of exiles, yeah. And the Jewish Agency, of course, it exists for gathering of exiles. And what I was saying that, look, we are the times of when most of the Jews who were under dictatorship, that we really had to send airplanes and to save them, whether it is from Ethiopia, whether it is from the Soviet Union, whether it is from some Latin American countries, not speaking about Arab countries. It's more or less behind this. Majority of those who are coming, it's Aliyah of free choice. And in order to make this free choice, they don't need emissary of Sachnut who is knocking the door and saying, why are you not here? Why didn't you make Aliyah? I had really to fight with this approach, that's the description whether Shaliach is successful or not, to how many doors he knocked and demanded to make Aliyah and how many he brought. And I said, people are making Aliyah today because they feel Jewish, because they want to be part of Jewish history or Jewish state and so on. For this, you have to strengthen their identity. And you're complaining that Jews are assimilating in America. You have to strengthen their identity. You're complaining that they're not fighting enough against anti-Semitism. You have to strengthen their identity. And there is no better way no better tool for Israel to strengthen this identity but to organize as many encounters between young Jews and Israelis as possible, whether it is through birthrights, whether it is through Masa, whether it is through summer camps, whether it is through our shlichim. And in the beginning, I was even accused by some ministers that I'm kind of bringing anti-Zionist cause, because what is Masa? People are coming and they are leaving. We need them to come and stay. And
you can understand the argument.
Well,
obviously.
of course I understand. Look, I want every Jew in the world to live here. But I also know that no Jew in the world, in the free world, today Russia is not a free world again, but no Jew in the free world will make Aliyah because somebody from Israel orders him to do it. That's simply, that's against our Jewish nature. It's, people have to become really interested, feeling that their Jewish life is lacking something by not being part of Israel. And that's the whole different approach. And I am glad that I created a new type of shlichim, for example, Israel Fellows of the Campuses. I told to Arik Sharon 2003 that the most important battlefield for the future Jewish people are the campuses, and start sending their Israeli representatives, and that the number of shlichim increased twice, two times bigger, and their average age became 12 years lower. Instead of 38, it became 26, because they really believe that if you want to convince young people in something, you have to talk to them through young people. You and I will not be able to convince anybody.
Well, speak for yourself. I'm sure I could convince hundreds of thousands of people tomorrow.
I speak to young people every day. I enjoy it because I feel myself younger. In the end, it is young people of their age who have to talk to them.
Peer to peer.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I mean, you say the campuses are the most important thing.
The most dangerous.
It's hard, right? I mean, like, I look at the data now, and they show, you know, in 2000, 20% of Harvard, 25% of University of Pennsylvania, Columbia were Jewish, and now it's 10% and going down. And in Princeton, it's much less. And you know, you now Jewish guidance counselors don't even know what to tell, you know, in Jewish day schools. They don't even know what to tell the juniors and seniors who are the top students in their classes that would have been shoo-ins to get into all of these schools a decade ago, and now there's no chance that they can get in.
I agree with you that it's that the percentage of Jews, not only students but as professors in many universities, goes down. But that's American problem. Why? Because the reason for this is this woke movement and this idea that not equality but equity and diversity and so on is a big problem.
Well, it's a rejection of meritocracy.
But the very fact that even when there were 10,000 Jews in Harvard, and there were 6,000 Jews in Columbia and 3,000 Jews in Pennsylvania, many of them felt, as some of them were saying, that for their future as liberal Jews, it will be better that Israel doesn't exist. There will be no connection between them, and that states that they have to justify all the time how you, liberal person, can be connected to Israel. And that happened in those days when there were many Jews. So there is American problem, which is suddenly the number of Jews in all the important institutions going down. And there is our Jewish problem, why so many American Jews feel themselves disconnected, feel themselves ashamed of Israel. And that's where the real danger is. The fact that America becoming anti-Semitic, that's a problem. The fact that more and more Jews, many Jews, try to distance themselves from Israel, that's our problem. Yeah.
And how do you think that if you were advising Prime Minister Netanyahu today, and Doron Almog, who is your successor at the Jewish Agency, what would be the kind of things that you would be telling them from a vision perspective?
Well, look, I was telling it all the time.
Well, tell us, because you're probably talking to them behind the scenes.
I stand, first of all, some compliments to Bibi. It's not popular today, but in the past, how came the idea of birthrights, of American young Jews coming in, tens of thousands today to Israel? There were two crazy Jews, Steinhardt and Bronfman, who came to Israel and said that they have this idea that every young Jew has to come to Israel because they see from their own children that the only way to make them interested in anything Jewish is to bring them to Israel. But they need support of Israel government. And it was I was the minister, it was the first Bibi's government. And I always felt that I'm also representing diaspora Jewry. I was very enthusiastic about it. The ministers mainly in the government were saying, what
do we care?
We not cared that we, those who are paying taxes, those who are fighting the army, those who are responsible for the future Jewish people, will give our money of our taxpayers to these rich American Jews in order they'll bring their children for free. It's anti-Zionism. And then Bibi really was the one who understood it, and there was historic meeting, Charles, Michael, Bibi and myself, when Bibi signed this document that Israeli government will be participating. It's by far the most successful program which in diaspora was, with all its problems, by the way, with all these political debates and so on. But the statistics about connection between Jews and Israel would be very different if there was no birthrates. Hundreds of thousands went to Israel, and that changes all the statistics. Now, it is really very important that Israel will be heavily involved in all the projects of encounter between Israel and Jews of diaspora. But also it is very important that every Jew, even the most politically far distant from us, will feel that is or can be his home, that she or he can easily come here with their kahila, with their prayers, with their rabbis. And it's something very difficult for Israelis to accept. Or some part of it is very much against, or the other simply don't care. You see, all this thing about conversion and about Jewish cemeteries and about Kotel, it's not that majority of Israelis are against. Majority of Israelis are indifferent. There is some group of people who are very much against.
Well, that's just like normal policy making in every country, right? That the people, if you have a large majority that's indifferent, then policy is made by the people who care.
Absolutely.
Right?
The only difference is that Israel is in a country. It was created as a country of all the Jewish people. That's why there is law of return, and that's why we do feel responsibility for the other Jews, and that's why we have to think about something which China or India or Italy, who have a big diaspora, don't have to think. So, yes, here I had my ups and downs with Bibi. On one hand, he understands very well. He is the one who understands the Western mentality and understands Jewish people. But because he became very, very political, he had to become very political, its influences also on what his attitude to the groups of Jews who are politically with us and those who are political not with us. What can be logical, but when it comes to the policy towards Jewish people and how we are bringing closer everybody, that's a big, difficult challenge, practical for every politician.
We don't have a lot of time, and I just want to ask you one last question, and because it's really important to hear what you have to say about this. You know, President Herzog said in an interview this week, he said, look, we're facing really, really difficult problems here in terms of who we are, how we organize ourselves as a people, and I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
But he said, but last week I was in Warsaw at the monument for the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and standing next to me was the president of Poland and the president of Germany. And the men and women who were fighting there 80 years ago could never have imagined, they dreamt of it, but in their wildest dreams they would never have imagined the success of this country. And one of the things that I'm wrestling with, and I'm sure millions of other Israelis are as well, is that maybe when our back is to the wall and we don't have any choice but to go forward and fight, and, even with certain death, our choices are easy. And now when we are a success story by, any measure that we did it, we have questions that really afflict us, and yet we could come down because of them. That now we have this luxuriant situation where we're free. We're freer than we've ever been. We're safer than we've ever been. We're more powerful than we've ever been. We're better off in every way than we've ever been. And yet now people are questioning the future of this country. How do you answer that? That now that things are easier, our problems become more difficult to resolve?
Well, I personally am very optimistic about our country, even in these really problematic days. And the problem is mainly that people stop talking to one another. We had this stupid period of time where suddenly our 25 parties turned into two parties. Rak lo Bibi or Rak Bibi.
Only Bibi or only not Bibi.
And then the polarization became so big that simply the two parts don't talk. So it is a dangerous situation. I'm optimistic that we'll get out of it simply because of history. On the other hand, our history gives us optimism because we survived 3,500 years. No, there is no other example. But history is also warning us. We had twice independent state, in the times of David and in the times of Maccabees. In both cases, it existed 75 years. So we have now to make a record, to exist much more desirably forever. So on the other hand, we do have unique experience of diaspora, both in terms of our tragedies, Holocaust, and in our successes. And I also hope that we learn from this. Israel is a miracle, but there are no books which can teach us how to build a state when so many different groups came, when even the word who is a Jew, they understand differently, whether it is religion or nationality or struggle against antisemitism. And when people feel that they are fighting for the future of the state and they have a vision exactly how the state has to look, and the others have different vision, and there is no book how you're building consensus or cooperation between the people who, for 2,000 years, more than 2,000 years, were different groups. And now they have to learn how to be one state. And of course, army is playing a very important role, and our enemies are playing a very important role in keeping us together. Still, we are in the process of learning how to live together. And here there are all these extremes. Once the Shoftim, our judges, decide that they are those who will be deciding the future of the people, then our politicians decide that no, we will go from one extreme to the other. And it's the period when there is no dialogue, real dialogue, like there was during the wars, of course. So it's a difficult moment. But look, I believe that with our experience and with enthusiasm and meaning which Zionism brought to all our lives, we will not give up on this meaning. We will not give up on this energy which we got. And well, I'm optimistic about the future.
I am too.
Yeah,
I am too. And I think that we did a pretty good job talking about our common denominators, which are so vast. They're oceanic.
Yeah.
And we have differences of opinion about things.
Next time we'll talk about differences.
Maybe.
Let's first build our
we're building
unity.
up. But I think that's the point, and that's the reason why I'm so glad that you came. And I hope you agree. We have a great future ahead of us. We have an extraordinary past behind us.
And we have a great country.
And we have an amazing country. A lot to look forward to together. So thank you so much, Natan. Thank you guys for watching and listening. And Chag Sameach to all of us. Ad Netzach.
Ad Netzach.
Right. For eternity. Take care. Have a great day.